This is a Renegade Media Network podcast.
Let me tell you guys about a sponsor of this show, and that is Zippix toothpicks. They are wonderful flavored toothpicks that have nicotine in each one. You can find them at zippixtoothpicks.com. A lot of you are probably trying to kick a bad habit here in the new year. These are a great alternative to that habit. And come on, let's face it. They're sponsoring this show, so you know that's a good thing. But I'm telling you, they're the cheapest alternative on the market. They've got flavors. Let me tell you, right here, I've got my packet. Zippix toothpicks, spearmint spice. I love this flavor. They've got whiskey flavor. They've got clove flavor. They want to sponsor shows like mine, so that should make you want to give them some business. They've got a promo code with the Counterflow podcast. The promo code is BUCK. B-U-C-K, of course. So go to Zippix Toothpicks. That promo code, BUCK, will get you 10% off of your order. Once again, zippixtoothpicks.com, promo code BUCK for 10% off your order. They're delicious. They got just the right amount of nicotine in them, and you will enjoy them. Kick that nasty habit, and let's get to the show.
You are now listening to the Counterflow podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, cause I call him the hologram brass, but I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus, but I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow podcast. Today, I'm happy to have Don the Pleb on with us from Plebian Media. His YouTube shows, well, it's big. He's got quite a large following, and someone said, hey, you've got to check out this series of videos Don the Pleb did on Operation Choke Point, and it's something that I had been hearing about right around that same time. So, long story short, I watched the videos and immediately I said, I need to talk to Don the Pleb about Operation Choke Point. However, when you get this guy on, there's a lot more to talk about than just that. So we get into a litany of subjects here, and check this out. Don was at the Capitol on January 6th. You know, the insurrection, as the corporate press likes to call it. He was there during the dangerous insurrection, and it's a country of untold millions and millions and millions of guns. And this insurrection, they didn't have any. What a dangerous insurrection that must have been. So we get a lot of details on exactly what really went down there at the Capitol on January 6th. And Don is he's a very articulate voice on the right. And of course, that's another reason I wanted him on here. And who better to ask what's wrong with the right than Don? And we get into a nice strategic discussion, maybe that's what we can call it, on that kind of thing as well. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. Of course, all you got to do is go to YouTube, type in Don the Pleb, and you'll find his stuff.
From Pleb Media, Don the Pleb is with us. Don, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, man.
Maybe I should say Plebian. And I always wonder this. Is it Plebian? Plebian? How do you say it?
I am too much of a pleb to care.
Very well. Well done. So this is the first time I've had you here on Counterflow. And when I do that, I got to get you to talk about yourself a bit. I just learned you're in the same state as I am. You're up in North Texas. What would you like if someone says, Don, what do you do? What would you like the audience to know in that regard?
I spend my time doing a couple of things, documenting the various ridiculous things of society, and talking about how the right can do something more productive than sit on its hands and lose, because we seem really good at that and less good at other things.
Yeah, you will get no argument from me on that. And I definitely want to get into that actual topic as well. I've been following your stuff now for a bit, and you've got the YouTube channel, but the media aspect of what you do is much bigger than just a YouTube channel. Talk about the media the giant corporation that you are, Plebian Media. Tell about that.
So some of it I kind of can't ridiculously. So for those of you who are aware of me and aware of things that go on behind the scenes, if you don't hear me talking about something, it's because I don't think I should. But there's a lot of stuff that I do. There's the aforementioned things, documenting what's going on, talking about getting people to do productive things. I'm also organizing meetups all over the country and in regional areas, because there's a reality that we're all pretty willing to get on the internet and talk hard and all kinds of stuff. And forming any sort of real relationship with another human being is 1,000% easier if you're sitting 6 feet apart than it is if you're sitting 1,000 miles apart. And people walk away from those things, even surprising me some. I have had some people that went to prior meetups or went to protests and things with me, and one of the two of them gets back to me months later and is like, yeah, man, we're like brothers now. We hang out all the time. And that kind of relationship forging, I think, is really important for anybody to the right of Mao, really. One of the things that I think we all suffer from the most is feeling like you're alone, like you're doing this by yourself. Like, yeah, you and 6 other guys get it. And it, even then you're kind of touchy with what you talk about, that sort of thing. So it really does matter. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal to a lot of people, but it really is. I've had some people quietly say things like, I think you've changed my life, which is a really flattering thing to hear for sure. And I never know how to handle that. So if you're going to DM it to me and I'm kind of awkward, that's why. But outside of that, I'm working on getting together. It has become colloquially known as Pleb Ranch. It started out as kind of a meme. My chat, my audience all got together and said, yeah, man, we should totally go build a ranch off the grid. And then we started losing pretty hard politically. And I went, maybe we should. So there's an active effort to get that done. It's going to happen far away from now, sadly. On top of that, though, I've got some media things that I do myself, like a chat server that you can't be struck off of because I own the hardware, I own the software. Ridiculously, I think I quite literally have too many pans in the fire, or however that saying goes. There's a near endless supply of these things, but it's amazing how productive people are on this front. And back to, why it is to form relationships in person is that we to the right of Mao part of the world, we're productive, skilled, useful, helpful, courteous, kind, supportive. And then we all stay as far away from each other as we possibly can. And if that's stopped, I think we're kind of a force to be reckoned with.
How long have you been doing, let's not phrase it that way. How long have you had an interest like you do in the political arena?
Oh, man. So I am a giant nerd like this. When I was a teenager, I was reading Fark.com. Now that's over 20 years ago now, and getting into arguments and comment sections because those people are lunatic leftists. And, you go out on the weekends and you act like an idiot. And then I come back and read the news, and I didn't think a lot of it made sense back then. And, when Drudge showed up on the scene, as it were, I read a lot of Drudge back in the day. I read a lot less now, but
yeah, right.
It's been about 25 years, 25 might be stretching it, but somewhere in between there that I've been pretty actively paying attention to politics.
I used to do the same with Drudge, and I don't know when and why I kind of faded away from it, maybe just jumping into more books or podcasts or something. But I do know over the last few years, they went, it seemed like, left from what people were telling me. I know they were very anti-Trump. What actually happened with them? Do you know?
I know all the rumor. And that basically boils down to Drudge thought it would get clicks to be anti-Trump.
Okay.
And that is supposedly from people who knew him or know him currently even. They all tell kind of the same story. Drudge was happy to go after the left because it got him clicks. And then Trump rolled around and he took one look at Trump and he said, well, this guy, if you're for Trump, everything in the world hates you and you don't actually get that much traffic. But if you're anti-Trump, then the entire news media, specifically if you've always been looked at as on the right, the entire news media highlights you. And then you get not only whatever traffic you keep from being vaguely on the right, but also all the progressives show up and they're happy to say, you know, look, even Matt Drudge, the neo-Nazi, thinks that Trump is a terrible person.
Yeah, that's unfortunately, that is true. Was there a moment along, I hate the term political journey, but I think recently more of us have become red-pilled. You know, maybe it's just one event or maybe it's a plethora of things, but is there a moment where you thought, like, you kind of look back and go, that was a red pill moment for me?
Yeah, it's probably ridiculously small, but there definitely is one. When I was really young, just barely an adult, 18 or 19 kind of vicinity, I was a bricklayer, and I had like waist length, long hair, hippie, idiot Californian kind of things going on. And because California is the test bed for all communist things that have ever existed, the personal is political there, and it has been for my entire life. And so somehow or another, the minimum wage came up some morning when I went to work while we're all sitting around waiting to get started on the job site. And I said something like, well, it seems pretty obvious that if you raise minimum wage, the cost of goods handled by people that deal with minimum wage is going to go up. And I had 5 people look me dead in the face and like I'd grown a second head, and one of them goes, "Who knew there was a Republican hiding under that long hair?" And I went, "I have no idea what you're talking about. I pay a lot of attention to politics, but I'm not really party affiliated. And this is California. There are no Republicans here anyway." So, and it's sort of been since that moment where just, well, look, if you drive up the cost of a good, the price of the good goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened probably ridiculously young for me, but it didn't matter what we were talking about ever in California. That was the way that it went. Is, if you have sex with 500 people, your chance of getting an STD goes up. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. And it was, that was my junior years, or at least my young adult years.
Let's talk about Operation Choke Point. And it's funny, I didn't really hear much about this thing till maybe a couple of months ago. I started hearing rumblings about it. And right when I was hearing about it, a listener of mine who is a listener of yours, shout out to Jeff, tagged me and said, "You've got to look at these videos." And they were put out by yourself. And it's fascinating. And I think, given the time that we're in, of course, with deplatforming, all the rage, and people, even the right now, finally talking about deep tech or big tech coming after, and the war on big tech, and what do we do? I think it's helpful to kind of learn about what this is, and something I want people listening to this to get is, when you're talking about politics or programs within government or any of this, is the formal meaning and the informal meaning. And I stole that, of course, from James Burnham. And there's a formal meaning always, and that's what they present. That's the nice, shiny package with the bow tie that a lot of people go, okay, that's what this does. And then there's the real meaning of something, and that's the informal. And so let's start with Operation Choke Point. What's the formal meaning that they give to the general audience on this?
Even in this, they were really vague. It was it's sort of marketed. If you go back and you listen to the original speeches about it, it's sort of marketed like, well, do we really want gun runners to have money in this country? So we should stop them from being able to use banks if we find gun runners. And anybody familiar with American law is very aware that if you find gun runners in the United States, you just have some federal agency seize their assets and lock down their accounts. So that wasn't it. But this was sort of the premise, was they were going to target the bad people, whoever those bad people were. There was they were going to drum up a list, and the experts were going to tell us who should be on that list. And then they weren't going to freeze your accounts. They were just going to tell the banks that you were a bad person, and see how that went is basically the ish sales point of this. And even then, you have to dig pretty hard for that, because the real, when you say like there's a formal idea, you think of things like, I don't know, Violence Against Women Act or something, right? Where it's, well, we're going to stop domestic violence and we're just going to call it the Violence Against Women Act. In Operation Choke Point, they talked about it, but this was not a big public thing. You can go find, the FDIC and Barack Obama talking to each other, but they didn't come out and say it to the general public effectively until they got caught. So in this, I don't know that, I mean, in retrospect, it looks like there's a formal sales pitch, but I think only in retrospect.
That's a good point. And so I guess, could you somehow qualify or quantify the informal goal? Because it certainly appears as if there was one, although maybe behind closed doors that was formal. What is the end result that you see from what it's done, essentially?
So the substantially informal goal of this is sort of reflective of the formal goal, insofar as somebody came up with a list of the bad people. And the plan here was they created a new function of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And what they were going to be is the morality police of the banks. They were going to go to banks and say, look, these people are on the bad people list. We're not saying that you have to stop having them as a customer, but if you don't, then the FDIC will not insure you. And for anybody who doesn't know, if the FDIC doesn't insure you in the United States, you're not a bank. You can be a credit union, but they have an equivalent. And as far as I know, there isn't an Operation Choke Point for that, but that might just be we haven't seen it yet. But regardless, if you want to continue being a bank, so if you're Chase Manhattan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, all names pretty relevant to what actually happened with Choke Point, then the FDIC comes to you and doesn't tell you that they're going to strip you of your capability to be a bank, but does tell you they're going to strip you of your capability to be a bank insofar as they won't insure you, because you effectively deal with undesirables. And the list is pretty long, and I don't remember all of it at this point, but it's gun sales, gun manufacturers, prostitutes, which, funny enough, the left clued us all into this because of sex work. Vice, as far as I can tell, is really the first group of people to seriously report on Operation Choke Point, and they reported on it, and I wish I was making this up, because strippers were losing their bank. Subsequently, they found a bunch of hookers that were losing their bank, and they said, we can't be making people who do sex work lose their bank accounts. Very up in arms about it. And then around the same time, you see a lot of gun stores, gun manufacturers. How pervasive this is incredible, because there are some people who were just gunsmiths, right? They things that they did in their house on a weekend, and they were losing their bank accounts because the FDIC had gone to the banks and said, well, we don't really like people who deal with guns, so maybe you shouldn't work with them. And the thing about this that makes it so creepy is the various associations that come later, and the simple fact that we have no idea whether or not it stopped. And I know if you go listen to most people about Operation Choke Point, they'll tell you, oh, it stopped 2015, 2014, depends on, you know, where they're going. But if you go read the court documents, no one ever says it stopped. No one ever got removed. No one ever got punished. The CPFB, Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, still in full working order. Some of the guys who were absolutely orchestrating Operation Choke Point straight from the top, still not only in that bureau, but in the same position they held when they were orchestrating Operation Choke Point. And there is nothing other than the say, quite literally, and not in court, just a released memo to the public that says, well, we think that Operation Choke Point was a mistake. And that's as close as they ever get to saying they stopped. And if you've ever dealt with a politician for any reason, nobody said stop.
Right.
You know, there's no point where they went, yep, it ended here.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was some of the stuff I read about it said that Donald Trump ordered an end to it. And I mean, it's not like him ordering an end to some kind of essentially deep state program like this is going to have a lot of meaning, I suppose. But I suppose it did not order the stop to it, or at least they didn't obey. You know, there's people lying to him about how many troops we have in Syria. So yeah. I certainly don't think this is going to be an issue for them.
And this is, you know, generals are one thing, and they sort of lean kind of left. The guys that were running Operation Choke Point were selected from years of doing progressive things. These were not people who may have just sort of tumbled into this for political reasons. These were political ideologues from the jump. One of the guys, in fact, effectively the head guy, spent all of his time prior to this appointment effectively trying to destroy landlords, which is some straight up original Marxist doctrine. So I would be surprised if they did anything more than kind of just tone it down. And there's some pretty decent indications. And make no mistake, my Operation Choke Point series is from quite a while ago now. But the things that have happened since then don't seem to make it any better. You know, the creators that have been kicked off things like Coinbase because, you know, crypto exchanges are going to be the answer to this. And there is ridiculous things that happen. Like Coinbase wanted to have USD on Coinbase insured in FDIC accounts. They applied to do that, got denied, went into review. All of these creators get deplatformed from Coinbase and they get approved. I mean, it's the coincidences are massive.
Let me tell you about the official coffee of the Counterflow podcast, and that is Lorenzotti Coffee over at lorenzotti.coffee. I drink Lorenzotti coffee every morning. It's that damn good. They are a great company run by very like-minded individuals. And what they do is they get their coffee beans imported directly from Italy. Then they package it up, vacuum seal it, of course, and it's ready to be shipped right to you. You got to go check out their storefront at lorenzotti.coffee. They've got these great-looking coffee grinders. They've got beautiful tins that you can get the coffee shipped in and keep it there on your kitchen counter. That's kind of what I do, actually. They've got pre-ground, whole bean, 12 packs, 5 packs, 3 packs. Really, any amount you may need, you will find it on their site. It's LORENZOTTI.coffee. You are loyal listeners to this show. They are loyal supporters of this show, which means you get a discount. Type in promo code BUCK at checkout and you will get 10% off of your order. That's BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout for 10% off of your order when you go to lorenzotti.coffee. See you there? Drink it every morning while you listen to this show.
So essentially, it sounds like I want to kind of tie some of it together for people listening. The FDIC seems to be the root of this, the whole issue with Operation Choke Point. So then there's incentives for companies who are using a bank because of the FDIC to kick off quote unquote undesirables. Is that about right?
Yeah. So the FDIC, for anybody who doesn't know, is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. They are why Bonnie and Clyde could walk into a bank and say, we're not here for your money. We're here for the bank's money, and the bank's money is insured. So everybody just sit down and relax. We're going to get the bank's money. They'll get it back. Nobody cares. And because that's what they do. They're also who repays you if someone fraudulently charges your bank account and that sort of thing. And the premise was that we needed a federal agency that was going to make good insurance good insurance decisions for everyday Joe citizen bank accounts, because banks something were screwing over customers, usual spiel. And part of any insurance company is risk assessment, and it's the nature, right? You guy with 50 car accidents, you don't give car insurance to unless you want to buy him a new car, probably, and somebody else. And so no small part of what the FDIC has done over the years is risk assessment. And that's sort of what Operation Choke Point is. It just doesn't use regular ideas that you would have for banking. If you overdraft your account every other week for, I don't know, the next 2 years, your bank account or your bank is going to come and tell you, well, no, you can't have a checking account because you overdraft accounts. And that's pretty obvious. And Operation Choke Point just took risk assessment and said, well, hookers and anybody with guns and people that we just generally don't like, right-wing personalities, they're high risk. And because of that, you shouldn't do business with them. And in the world of things that we see happening way later, with Stripe deplatforming people, MasterCard, right? The payment processors of the world. This was stage 2 of Operation Choke Point. So it's hard to encompass in just a few minutes for sure. But, if you personally, right, you Buck, have a bank account and the FDIC decides that you're high risk, it's not so much that they just hand down an order that says, go get rid of Buck. What they do is they go, dear bank, Buck is high risk. And if you're going to engage with high risk behavior, we can't insure you. And it's this kind of creeping non-threat thing that you see all over the place. I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what makes it so pervasive, because if you go read some of the internal letters about the Operation Choke Point guys, they are talking about, we don't want to be telling banks, go get rid of this person. We don't want to be telling payment processors, get rid of this person. We want to scare them into acting on their own, taking credit for it on their own. They go out and virtue signal about how they got rid of people because it was the right decision. And I forget the guy, he writes about Islam all the time. When MasterCard debanked him and took him off payment processors, and thus PayPal got rid of him, if you go listen to the Matt Christensen interview, it's pretty obvious that down to Patreon, they are talking, oh no, this was our decision. Well, but we had to, but it was our decision. And this continued transference of responsibility forward is part of the point of Operation Choke Point. It's one of the original goals, and you still see it going.
Yeah, it's almost the centralized power aspect of it over decentralized companies, kind of what makes it look in the end like they've collaborated. Yeah. Because if the FDIC is backing the banks that say YouTube uses, and Google and Apple and Patreon, well, then it's going to make it look like Google got with Apple, got with Patreon, and got with the server and banned Alex Jones. While really it could be a centralized authority of sorts sending down the quote unquote threat or suggestion at the same time.
So it's worth noting that everyone you just mentioned there has some tie to the FDIC.
Right.
And specifically the banking system, marginally because they all handle money somehow, right? Google Pay is a payment processor. Apple Pay is a payment processor. I forget who the other one was. Patreon is a payment processor, right? At least end user payment processor. And the thing about this is that conspiracy theorists, I seem to recall, were on the list, right? So
Of
it's
course.
worth noting, in again, how creepy the coincidences of all this is. The very first adpocalypse on YouTube happened while Google was under review from the FDIC to see if they could establish Google Pay. I mean, no way that is just coincidence. And I know, well, Don, it could have just happened at the same time. And I've heard it before.
Yeah.
But again, these kinds of coincidences exist everywhere. You know, Coinbase, Stripe, same problem, right? Stripe was overtly told they were not allowed to be a payment processor, went into a meeting with the FDIC. And it's something like within 7 days of walking out of that meeting with the FDIC, they start banning people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is incredible the number of times that these just massive coincidences happen.
It's the crazy bachelor gets tied down. His soon-to-be wife says, "You got to ditch those friends. I don't like you hanging out with them." He goes to them. "This is just a coincidence. It's not because I'm getting married, but I can't hang out with you guys anymore."
Exactly.
Complete coincidence here. It was not my wife, my future wife, telling me to do this. So one of the things, I mean, this has been a giant issue, the deplatforming thing, because people from a right perspective, a right-leaning perspective, we have a bit of an issue on how to help fix this thing because, on one hand, you'll have the blue-pilled libertarians just screaming, "Hey, it's a private company. Let them do what they want." And on the surface, that seems okay. But then is it really private when you've got the FDIC involved in this? A lot of these companies had CIA money to get their initial funding. That's not private, certainly. I've seen people on the left, not that they ever sound particularly brilliant, but I've seen people say social media companies they're just all run by white libertarians. And I think, what? That's weird that we keep eating our own then. And promoting Joe Biden basically to win this last election. But so we kind of search for these ways to work around this system or fight it. What are your thoughts on that?
I like probably the most unpopular thing on the internet, because that's like my favorite thing to do. 230 is not inherently a bad thing. And that alone probably just cut your viewership in half, because that's how it goes every time I say it. But the premise that YouTube shouldn't be sued if I get on YouTube and say something horrific and obviously defamatory seems pretty clear. And I don't think we'd have, well, I know for a fact we would not have social media without it. One of the things that I keep telling people is the social media stuff that I am putting together, it all goes away if 230 goes away. Because if so much as one leftist shows up and posts child porn, I'm now legally liable for child porn. And let's face it, we already have enough problems with the FBI finding that stuff where it wasn't before anyhow.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I get it, right? And there are very serious problems with this, and I understand why people don't like 230 at the moment, but destroying the internet I don't think is the answer. Specifically going back to how so many of us feel alone, and the way that we get around feeling alone at the moment is the internet.
Right.
I mean, this is not a good plan. And the left has no problem organizing, right? They use cell phone networks and get away with it every day. If you had Parler installed and you were at January 6th, the FBI is tracking you down immediately. So, it's not the same footing, which sort of leads to, how do we deal with this? Well, if you grant that, look, you can't sue these people for what people say on the lines, right? Sort of the same grant that we give AT&T and Verizon and everybody else. The flip side of that is, well, they can't ban people, right? That's not how this works. We have given you governmental protection, so now you have to follow the government's rules. And interesting enough, as of the day that we're recording this, yesterday, Clarence Thomas didn't say that precisely, but he hinted at it really hard. Well, if you were to bring this kind of case to the Supreme Court, clearly you could reference this case law, and you could find out that the government isn't allowed to abridge the freedom of speech, nor is it allowed to compel a company to infringe on the freedom of speech on its behalf. And that if we're providing some sort of protection for a company, then they can't do that. And I'm not a big fan of just writing a law and then thinking that it will all take care of itself. So I want 230 to be an affirmative defense, which is a thing that nobody is familiar with outside of copyright infringement and fair use, right? So if you put up a video critiquing someone else's content and they copyright strike you, you say this is fair use. And when you say fair use, what you mean is, yes, I used your copyrighted work, but I'm legally allowed to for X, Y, and Z reasons over here. And so we're not questioning whether or not I used your content. We're questioning whether or not it was legal for me to do so. And that's the same position I want Twitter, Facebook, YouTube in, right? So, okay, we say 230 says you get the protection, so you have to follow the First Amendment. That still means they're going to be able to kick people off, right? If you are on any sort of platform overtly calling for terrorism, it's not going to be protected. If you said kill Bob the Builder right now immediately, then God forbid anything happened to Bob the Builder, but you are also legally responsible for that. That is direct threats, etc., wouldn't be protected. So all of these social media companies could kick you off. Well, if they do, you are automatically granted the right to sue them because their answer is an affirmative defense, right? So if they're right to kick you off, well, then who cares, right? They go to court. They say, look, here is our X, Y, Z reasons why we kicked you off. They are lawful reasons. You were calling for violence against Bob the Builder at a specific time and date. That's not lawful. Here's the Supreme Court precedent. And they have plenty of lawyers. They'll be fine. Rightly, the answer to this is, well, yeah, but so what? Then they still have to go to court a million times. Okay, include an anti-SLAPP provision. If you file a lawsuit that is just complete garbage in specifically Texas, right? You can be countersued. Mm-hmm. And now, look, don't get me wrong. I understand you can't get blood out of a turnip, but it will dissuade these lawsuits. There will still be people who file bad lawsuits for getting kicked off, but there will be less of them, because if I sue Google after they rightly kicked me off, Google comes down and says, this is why we kicked you off. This is why it was legal. So now we're taking your house, your car, your dog. Thanks. Have a nice life. Right. And it keeps a sort of competitive balance of power in here. And I'm not, I assume that something like the ACLU, terrible as they are, would show up and be willing to just sue the hell out of, everybody, right? Robert Barnes has new career, instantly able to sue every social media company if they have to act in affirmative defense fashion whenever they kick someone off. And Robert Barnes is not going to go around suing them if he's going to lose, right? The lawyers are important here. Their incentives are don't sue. So, or at least don't sue if it's not a good case. And this would at least put us back in a position where there is a cost for any social media platform to kick you off. And so they're probably not going to do it wantonly, right? Which is what we see right now. Deplatforming Alex Jones. Alex didn't actually do anything, right? Oh my God, he said the Sandy Hook thing and it was mean. Well, you're allowed to say mean things, right? And so if YouTube and Twitter and Facebook all had to go to court and go, well, we kicked Alex Jones off because he said mean things, every judge in the country would go, mean things are protected speech. You know who you get to thank for this? The ACLU. Muskogee. Enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well put. You mentioned their January 6th.
Indeed.
Are we allowed to discuss that?
By all means.
Okay.
Your show.
Well, from the stuff I've seen, you were at the Capitol on January 6th, correct?
Indeed, I was.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're all cool with saying that these days. Who knows? Although I'm starting to see that the charges are the hardcore charge of trespassing. But
Indeed, I will take my fine.
yeah. So can you describe that day and kind of what you saw there? Because I have a lot of questions, and I'm hearing different things from different kind of corners of political world here. But let's get someone who was there to discuss it.
So I was there for a long time. When I go to protest things, I show up early, I stay late. This is how, if you go over to the channel, you'll find a bunch of me marching with the Proud Boys throughout, 2, 3 in the morning kind of things. So I got there at, I want to say 8 o'clock in the morning, standing at the Washington Monument, waiting for people to show up, because there were quite a few people who said to show up and go with me. And early on in the day, they closed off the Washington Monument before Trump started speaking. And everybody sort of went along with that. There's like, it's 8 in the morning. Let's save the fight for when there's fighting. And one guy went running through there, and the DC cops, and this, sometime later, we're talking 20, 30 minutes later, some guy just goes walking through the Washington Monument. And so they just run over and arrest him, which pissed off the whole crowd. Everybody rushed back into the Washington Monument and started yelling at cops saying, look, this is ridiculous. This guy didn't do anything, right? If he had, I don't know, blown up the Washington Monument, we'd be with you. But he walked on some concrete. Leave it alone. They, of course, did not care. And then the speeches started. I'm going to gloss over a lot of this because it's not very important. It's cold. It's kind of crappy. We're standing around. For whatever anybody will tell you, it was not very well put together. I don't think there were 1 million people there personally, but there were probably hundreds of thousands. And this is when one of the first, I think, deadly moments occurs, which is to say that we're standing there in the National Mall, and a fire truck goes driving by. It goes driving by the other way. It goes driving back. It goes driving by the other way again. And right about then, somebody had a heart attack or something, and they were dialing 911, as you do. And the fire department couldn't find him. Just straight up had no idea what was going on. And so called back the number that dialed 911 and said, hey, go to this place. We will be there. It's close to where you said you were, and we'll get you. Now, I have no idea if that person died or not, relevantly speaking, but this should tell you the kind of problems that existed. Simply having that many people in one place, if there's some mild medical emergency, and statistically there will be, you have a high likelihood of dying, right? Simply because no one can get to you. It's not anything malicious. It's just, look, if you're 1,000 miles into the middle of the Mojave Desert and you dial 911, somebody on the other end might pick up, and if they do, they're going to say, well, I hope you can make it a few hours, because that's just how it is. And if you're 75 years old and have a heart attack, you're probably not making it. This is just a reality. And the more that we find out about the deadly January 6th, the more we find out that that's basically everybody, right? All but the one cop, and even then, we're already into problems. Anyhow, so we sit there through a few of the speeches, and right about the time, or right before Trump starts talking, because they just leave everything open. Nobody talking, nothing. And a bunch of us in the crowd start walking towards the Capitol building because, look, we're here to go yell at the people in the Capitol building. And as soon as we get to the Capitol, the cops have it all cordoned off, and there are effectively no police there, which is a completely noteworthy point. You're talking barely a viable guard shift is standing there. And right about the time Trump gets done talking, everybody goes over the first set of barricades, or through, right? I guess through is a much more accurate description because, cops opening gates and that sort of thing. And you get right up to the Capitol steps. And because I'm a guy with a camera, I'm over there, I'm running, right? So I'm right at the head of the crowd. And as soon as I get to the Capitol steps, I get OC sprayed in the face. very exciting beginning to your day. And by that, I mean, the second I was in range of this cop with OC spray, he's over there doing this, right? And credit to him, he's a good shot. So that's how we start off the day, is the moment. And look, the cops are not in any way pushing back on protesters walking up to the steps. They're turning around and running. They all back up to the Capitol steps. And from there, things escalate pretty dramatically because they are instantly to crowd control things. Look, the moment you're in range, you get no OC sprayed. I've never seen Antifa treated like this. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately thereafter comes out the pepper spray, the bear mace. They have what looks like a pressurized super soaker for bear mace,
Mm-hmm.
OC spray, whatever it is that they are running there, right? And they are just walking out with these things and hosing down the whole line of people. People getting pepper sprayed just 20, 30 feet back from the front of this line. Worth noting, by the way, not a lot of violence going on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of yelling, a lot of flag waving. And then they start doing things like pulling flags out of the crowd and that sort of stuff. Now, supposedly, if you listen to the story, it's because people were beating the hell out of cops with flags. It's not really what I saw, but to be fair, you can't see everything. And so this continues on. They put up a new set of barricades. To be fair, somebody does rip down that little gate that's right in front of the Capitol steps. Somebody kicked it over and pulled it out of the way. So they put up another set of barricade ramps, and we get up there. I actually have a decent conversation with a cop while I'm standing there. And right about the time that everybody is pushing just a hair up those Capitol steps, right, as they're trying to put these barricades back in, there's a little balcony right at the top of the National Mall side of the Capitol building, and they walked out roughly a squad, so 12 to 15 guys with M16s, and all leaned out over that little parapet right there and started aiming at the crowd. And so, look, whoever I was there with was get the hell out of the way of that. He pulls that trigger, a bunch of people are going to die. So we all move off to the side. And right about the time this happens, the cops, I think they M203, which is the 40 millimeter underbarrel grenade launcher. They have one for pepper spray and CS gas. They start launching CS canisters, and they pop a guy in the face from 20 yards away. And I've got some people there with me. Look, I've been to enough of these things. Got Malox and all kinds of other just minor medical equipment. So we're all pushing through the crowd, getting up there, and luckily somebody else was already there, was pretty on scene immediately with some medical equipment. And there's blood everywhere. I mean, this was not some mild grazing wound. This guy got popped square in the face with a 40 millimeter grenade. And so, in a less than shocking turn of events, the crowd gets pissed. Hey, look, we've all been sitting around watching Antifa light everything on fire for months. Yeah. And the moment that we walk up to this building, you're going to damn near kill someone with a grenade launcher. No, thank you. And again, worth noting, crowd control gas, not an actual grenade.
Yeah.
And this turns into an argument, and suddenly the guys with M16s disappear for a little bit, and we establish sort of a line, and everybody sits and yells at each other for a while. This is, I know this is going quick, but this is a couple hours in by the time they get reinforcements there. So for all the cops on scene that are saying, look, we didn't have any help, we didn't have any support, they ain't kidding. It was multiple hours, and it was maybe 50-ish cops that were there by themselves, multiple hours. And there was a rowdy side of this and kind of a quiet side of this. And I was on the more quiet side, which is how for the vast majority of it, which is how I ended up having this conversation with the cop. And, this guy is, there's this weird thing that is going on with this, I think is summed up with, hey, you think maybe you should be on this side? And he said, well, look, man, you can't just run up on federal buildings like that. And I went, well, but you can. Like, this is the point of protesting, is running up on federal. Who are we supposed to be protesting if not the feds? I mean, at least in DC. Come on now. But I will say, a handful of cops quit that day, and I get the feeling that most of the reason came down to, well, when I say I get the feeling, I mean, I know for a fact, one of the cops that got pepper sprayed in the face happened to go walking away past me, and he was, F this is BS anyway, to hell with this. I said, well, you can just hop the fence and come over here with us. And he stopped dead in his tracks, looked me in the face, looked down at the ground. And to be honest, I never saw that cop again. So I have no idea whether or not that guy just sat down and getting pepper sprayed sucks. I'll grant you that. But if he just sat down and then disappeared somewhere else, but considering how many cops very clearly didn't want to be there doing that, I'm not surprised that a bunch quit. It is worth noting, I guess, at this point, I was never in the Capitol building.
Okay.
I was never inside I was not on that side of the building, right? Dear federal agent that watches everything I put on the internet.
Right.
And so, I don't know what happened with Ashley Babbitt. I don't know, I saw the Alex Jones clips later. I have nothing to do with any of that. And I'm not just saying that for legal reasons. There's video of me where I was standing. But they were mighty free with pepper spray, tear gas, what are those, beehive riot control grenades. It's a little grenade, you throw it in the air and it throws little rubber BBs all over the place. The guy that was throwing those pretty consistent, and by that I mean it was throw, it would pop, and right about the time it popped, he's got another one in the air. And he knew what he was doing. I do understand wanting to get rid of the flagpoles at this point, because this guy gets through about 5 of these grenades, and somebody takes that flagpole, slaps that thing back out of the air, back at the cops. Who, look, don't throw explosive devices at cops. On the other hand, you had to know that was coming at some point. But eventually this turns into, we flow up the Capitol Hill steps, and they are just tear gassing constantly at this point, right? Up through the what's it called? The railing that they've got there, scaffolding. And then right about here, the Trump video comes out, people start turning around and leaving. And this is, I think, where a lot of the Antifa thing started, because there were quite a few people who were just walking around with that video going, look, it's time to go home. President said everybody leave. And so the vast majority of the crowd turns around and leaves. And there's a couple of people up at the front of the line going, F Trump, man, we just need to tear down the system, and start spewing commie propaganda. And a whole bunch of people went, have fun with the cops, because we're leaving you to it, and turned around and left them. It's worth noting that about 20 minutes after that, the front line of this pushed back about 50 feet. So Antifa clearly not willing to lay it down. Right after that, they declared an unlawful assembly, and the National Guard shows up. And by right around then is where I got too far away to know what's going on. Because I might be willing to stand in front of the National Guard haphazardly throwing around riot control stuff with live rounds. But, there were people who showed up with me that I felt responsible for. I'm not going to have them do it. But by this point, there's effectively nobody there, right? I walked back over there to go make sure I had everybody and find, see if there's anybody else that I needed to go look for, that sort of thing. And there's maybe 50 people. There are no longer hundreds or thousands, nor tens of thousands. There's maybe 50 people. And it's worth noting that I left before the MRABs pulled up. So I don't know how quickly they dispersed after that. But by this point, basically everybody's gone. So all the stuff you hear in the news about, the National Guard had to be there to throw them out. Like, did they? I mean, 50 people out of hundreds of thousands.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
By all means, they need to be there for 50.
There's been conspiracy people say things like, clearly this was a false flag because you saw the lack of law enforcement. And so maybe that was on purpose to pull these people in, essentially, at least give them incentive, like, I can get in there, no one's blocking it. There's various stories with that fall in that category. Is there any of that to you? Did it seem, I don't know, like there's some powers that be that wanted this to happen so then they could do the, act in a draconian manner against the country in general?
Well, there's some stuff that we know happened, right? And we only know in retrospect. Like, there was a request for National Guard on scene to begin with. There was a request for more officers to be in place to begin with. There was a lot of, hey, give me backup. There's a decent possibility there's going to be a lot of people here. And having been in DC during other events, they had nobody effectively for them out there. I have seen DC police of varying stripes cordon off multiple intersections at the same time in DC. And there were not enough officers at the Capitol building, specifically when I first got there, to cordon off even one. They just simply couldn't have done it. And when I say they cordoned off, I mean shoulder to shoulder, one human being, 4-lane wide streets, to each direction. And they are so tight together that you couldn't get a mouse out of there if they didn't want you to. And that was not there. That presence didn't exist. And again, we know in retrospect that somebody asked for that. So insofar as that's true, is there maybe some, well, let's let them get out of hand and then send people in? Sure. Again, having sat there and sort of talked to and or at a few cops, most of them didn't want to be there as far as I could tell. They were already dragging their feet. They already didn't want to be doing what they were doing. And that was a ton of them. They're still doing it. So, for anybody who's going to give you well, they still did it. Yes, they did. But they didn't want to be. And to the point that a couple of them quit that day. Is it more likely that this is Illuminati 6,487 dimensional chess, or that a cop who already didn't want to be stopping rioters went, you know what, hell with it, open the gates? What are they can do? Right. These guys are mostly peaceful anyway, and not like Antifa's mostly peaceful. Like,
right?
Yeah, okay, Antifa jumps them and they fight back, but other than that, they're usually fine. So what the hell? And in the world of risk assessment things, I get how you get to that conclusion. In the world of, is it, underwater backgammon? I don't think that is in evidence for sure. Is it possible? Sure. But lots of things are possible. They just don't happen.
Let's talk about one of my favorite sponsors of this show, and that is Paloma Verde over at palomaverdestore.com. It's a wonderful small business run by a great couple out of San Antonio, Texas. That would be Carlos and Vanessa. What will you find at palomaverdestore.com? All things CBD, everything you need in that regard. This is your one-stop shop. They've got CBD gummies, CBD pet products, CBD soft gels, tinctures, topicals, and you've heard me in the past rave about the sports cream. I'm going to rave about it again because it works very, very well. I cannot recommend it enough. You know who else recommends their products? My dog, Lux. He's about 10 years old now. He was not getting around as quickly as he used to until I started putting some of it on his food every morning. How cool is that? So I've got a promo code for you guys because you're loyal listeners of this show and they are loyal supporters. It is BUCK, B-U-C-K. At checkout, that will get you 25% off of any purchase over $75. And check this out. You sign up for their emails and then you'll get an extra 10% off, which will then give you a total of 35% off of your order. How cool is that? Again, that is promo code BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout, palomaverdestore.com. Let's get back to the show.
Do you think the right in this country is becoming more, we'll call this red pilled also, maybe more suspicious of cops in general and or the military?
Yes, overtly so. The first real instance I saw of this was the Proud Boys marching on the night where a bunch of them got stabbed.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, the second night I was out there with them. The first night I'm out there with them, Enrique Tarrio's out there. He's got a megaphone, and the Proud Boys get close to kind of running into a line of cops. And he's, Proud Boys, back it up. Everybody stop. We're here to make the cops' job easier. We'll go toil with Antifa, but leave the cops alone, right? And the Proud Boys get up and they move back away from the cops. And coincidentally, I'm sure, the night that a bunch of them get stabbed, Tarrio's not there because they arrest him at the airport for having 30-round mags or something dumb, right? And my hate speech. And so it's the lieutenants, I guess, is the right term, who are generally running this sort of thing, and they're keeping to the same party line, right? Which is, look, we're not here to fight the cops. On the other hand, a lot of the crowd is now getting pissed because they know people are getting stabbed, right? And that the cops are kind of not doing a lot about it. That they are, like, well, we arrested the guy and, eventually kind of game is at least the story that's going on that night. I was there for one of the stabbings, and I don't even know how much I should say. They sort of took care of it on their own. And by the end of this, what you start seeing is the Proud Boys walk up to a line of cops, and it's F the police, right? I used to back the blue till tonight. I can't believe you guys are taking their side, kind of things, right? And I don't know that I blame them, right? You've got the left burning down half the country and Proud Boys getting arrested for having 30-round magazines, And look, whatever rationalization you want to wrap around that, a cop still put handcuffs. That's how that happened. Whether or not that's a good rationale, whether or not that's good reasoning, doesn't really matter. It's very emotional. It's very visceral. When some friends of yours got stabbed in the past 15 minutes, I understand how you get there. And so this was really the severe turning point, I think, where a lot of the right went, wow, maybe they're really not on our side.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're really, really not doing us a lot of good. And then you start to get, some of the stuff on the 6th is just ridiculous. Cops were more than happy to dish out punishment, as it were, to rioters that, as soon as I got back from the 6th, I started seeing the memes of, yes, why would the right? And it's that picture of DC on fire everywhere, right? Why would the right do this? And I think it was kind of a shock to the system. I don't know that the right is into the all cops are bad territory, but I think they're pretty damn suspicious at this point.
Yeah, and I think the year of the lockdowns seem to push people that way too. When you see the summer of riots and then nothing, and a mom at a softball game or a lady at a bank in Houston getting tackled for a mask issue.
Yeah, that lady at the playground with her kid, that was a big moment for it too, where a lot of the right went, you can't be serious.
Right.
This lady with her 3-year-old alone in a park, and you're going to arrest this woman. And I get why. Again, it's a real emotional thing to sit and watch that. I don't know, again, if it gets you to the all cops are bad, but I know for a fact that it was right around that point that I started seeing, even the internet cops who will justify nearly anything saying, well, I don't support that cop. right? Everybody knew that that was bad. The veteran that they tackled in an airport for no reason. These sorts of things, and they all happen all at once. And I think it put a lot of bad will for cops out there. That and the lesson of the 92 riots all over again, right? Which is to say that no, the cops will not be there if the violence is bad enough. They will not be there if the violence is pervasive enough. And think whatever you want about that, but the number of cops per person is extraordinarily low to be able to handle something like that. It's why they call in the National Guard. It's 24 per thousand or something is like the average in any given city, if I remember correctly. So if there's a quarter of the city is rioting, the cops, the whole force is outnumbered, 5 to 1, 10 to 1. There becomes a limit to what they even can do.
Why does the right, or let me ask it this way. How has the right become so good at losing? I know this could be I know you could go for an hour or so, but it's a subject I like to bring up often, and especially with guests like yourself who think about these things. But in a nutshell, what would you say on that?
So you've heard the saying, practice makes perfect?
Yeah, right.
In eminent nutshell, that's how it works, right? Is that being a politician in general has a whole bunch of incentives to it. And most of those are don't make too many waves. And you can see the violation of this with the left, right? And most recently, Barack Obama passes the Affordable Care Act, gets slaughtered in the House and the Senate immediately thereafter. Very next election, people are getting recalled. Everybody's angry, made waves, right? And so the left is willing to sacrifice political positions to get things done. The right has learned that as long as you virtue signal hard enough, even if you lose, it doesn't matter that much. And their voting base agrees with that, at least tacitly, right? No one would say that out loud. No one's, well, yeah, I don't really care if they win, as long as they say something angrily. But we keep voting for the people that do that. Subsequently, we have learned to lose in a way that I think only the Fabians would truly appreciate. And in the world of trying to piss off just everyone, when the Affordable Care Act passed, the Republican Party campaigned very heavily on repealing the Affordable Care Act. And unless they got veto-proof majorities, it was never going to happen. However, the next time that we had a Republican candidate, what did he say? He didn't say we're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. He said we're going to repeal and replace it.
Yeah.
And this is the absolute reality of how the right really loses. When Social Security was passed in this country, it was so horrendously unpopular that, again, you see the slaughter in the House and the Senate, just massive numbers. And then as soon as the Republicans have control again, they don't repeal it. And now, if you go to the Republican voting base and you say, we're going to repeal Social Security, grandma will get out of her chair to make sure you're recalled. All right. Because we do the initial failure. We don't get the thing gotten rid of, right? And then no more than a generation later, we are not just protecting it some, we're overtly promoting it as though it's our own. And that is failure to a level that's difficult to describe, right? I mean, this is sort of like a rape victim coming back to you in 5 years and being like, rape is great.
Yes.
I mean, at some point you go, are you nuts? and that's sort of where we are as the right, and part of it is once you have a generation that grows up with a policy, that policy is the normal. So the way that you don't make waves with something that's normal is you say you're going to save it, right? Because it's been there your whole life. It's already part of life. It's a thing that people depend on. And so you just don't make waves. And in this, the right is really, really risk averse, like ridiculously so. It's part of why people like Trump is that he was not incredibly risk averse. He was, willing to come out in front of the news media and go, "You fake news," right? And can you imagine, I don't know, Mitt Romney ever in all of time doing that? And nobody can, right? Because he's a wet blanket. And wet blankets are a thing that the right likes. And if you're talking about people who don't like change, who respect tradition, who, generally speaking, respect some sort of authority and are not out there crusading to change the world, none of that's a surprise, right? The voter base of the right are people who are naturally predisposed to these things. And so that's the politicians they get. They do get tired of getting stepped on, very obviously. And so when Trump comes along, everybody, rebel, let's go. And then you get sort of the problem of Trump, where Trump did some ridiculously terrible things a few times. And it didn't matter because he was fighting, right? It didn't matter if he was fighting and winning or fighting and losing. As long as he was fighting, that's really what we needed. And that was, I'm a little afraid that that's where we're going next, is just more of that. But I think that's the next order of magnitude of losing, as it were, is, the really libertarian parts of the internet were posting memes about people turning in their guns to the FBI or ATF and being like, "So this is all part of the plan, right?"
Yeah, right.
And I'm a little afraid we will actually be subject to that at some point.
Oof, yeah, and I've heard, it's been said, if the one thing that's going to make you stand up for your rights is when they come for your guns, then you've already lost the battle at that point.
Yeah, well, 1934 called, and they'd like to let you know that its friend in 86, the Hughes Amendment to the National Firearms Act, have come for your guns.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about the right's scared of a lot of things. For instance, the latest thing I've seen now is Tucker Carlson last night had on Asa Hutchinson, who's the governor of Arkansas. And he vetoes this bill that the bill basically was trying to put an end to chemical castration, as they're calling it, basically where a young kid decides, I don't want to be the sex that I am, so put me on puberty blockers. And the governor's sitting there saying, well, I vetoed it because let me think, I'm into small government. That's what I'm into. And it's how he could say that with this, I don't think a lot of people think of Republicans anymore as being into small government. And Tucker rightly hit him with, well, then why don't you repeal drinking age laws? And why don't you repeal sex consent laws? If you're in a small government, go ahead. Why don't we legalize heroin then? But of course, he's not going to do all that. And I thought it was appropriate when Tucker says, towards the end, he says, how would the Asa Hutchinson of 10 years ago reacted if they said you're going to veto a bill that outlaws chemical castration on kids? And that, I hope that hit him where he's thinking, at least I just got called out in front of a large audience, because like to your point, we're going to be against it one day, and then one day we're going to be saving it. And it's interesting. I think voices like Tucker Carlson are helpful. Voices like yours, certainly. Does it seem like the Trump era kind of woke some, I hate to use the word woke, sorry.
I know what you mean. Are people suddenly much more politically aware?
Yes.
And suspicious?
There's a lot of the country right now that thinks they just had an illegal election and now we're living with the consequences.
So I hate polls with a fiery red passion. And I should preface this with that. But if you look at the polls, even if you start slanting the numbers in the direction that you should, because they always go towards whatever the left wants, that's how all sampling goes, right? Is just conveniently in favor of the left every time. But even if you do that, the number of people who think the election was outright fraudulent is pretty small. at least for those of us who are paying a lot of attention, right? So when I say pretty small, I am 100% certain that nearly all of my audience is like, small, all of us know Don. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. There were 50 of you who watched me stream the election for 24 straight hours. That's it. You guys all know. After that, though, you get into, was something fishy? And the is something fishy numbers are pretty decent. It's like even half of Democrats are like, yeah, something was wrong, but who cares? Which is another unnerving thing, is
Yes.
that they are overtly saying, well, even if he stole it, who cares? At least Trump's out of office.
Yep.
But in the world of, are more people suspicious and paying attention? Suspicious, yes. I think I could whole agree with that premise, right? And make no mistake, these are people who would commonly tell the joke, how do you know when a politician's lying? His lips are moving, right? So for a lot of those somewhat normie people, what they had was their suspicion confirmed. And just, that's it. This sucks. Are people paying more attention? I don't think so. I maintain a couple of sort of group relationships, with people that I just overtly don't talk about politics with. And if they do, I just shut up, intentionally so. And they are still into a ton of the kind of normie nonsense. I will say that the FBI has destroyed itself in the eyes of the public. Insofar as that's true, yes, I think more people are paying attention. Is that, if there's a talking point on Fox News, are they aware of it? Yes. If CNN is saying something dumb, are they aware of it? Yes. But that was true 10 years ago, right? And I think that for those of us who do very heavy political stuff, it's easy to get caught up in who we are and what we do. And look, there is no member of my audience who has been around for more than 6 months that I could talk to that wouldn't know intimate details about this sort of thing. They were cataloging on their own, we'll say, strange things about the election, right? Because after a certain point, I said, look, I'm not covering this anymore. It doesn't matter. It's over. And they said, no, we want to keep track. And I went, okay, well, here's a good place to keep track. And they find stuff that surprises me, but it's over. It's done with. It doesn't matter anymore. And I think that little bit, right? It's over. It doesn't matter anymore. Whereas I say that about funny things that happened with the election, a ton of people on January 21st went, well, politics is over and done with. Who cares? Bought a lot of guns and ammo, dicks, but that was pretty much it. They shrugged and went home and said, well, I'm just going to live my life as I see fit. And a lot of force, political will, movement force kind of things evaporated on that day. And I think we're not really going to know quite how much until the midterms.
Okay. Well, I've kept you here so damn long. This has been even better than I imagined. You have a lot to plug, because just when I look at your YouTubes, I think, geez, I need to work on my own links. But talk about where people listening can find you.
Oh, there's so many places. So many that I generally forget at least one. I still have a Parler account. I'm the last guy.
Is it working?
It is most of the time.
Oh, okay.
But they have something functioning again. So Parler, I helped you out as best I could here. I have a Gab account, which is at 2 Plebs. I think the Parler account is Don the Pleb. The first thing that you will learn about from me here is that I am very bad at branding. My Twitter account is at Hilo Procurement, all one word. You can find me on most of the streaming services as Pleb Media, Pleb Media. I'm on YouTube as Pleb Media, Trovo, DLive, Entropy, Probably be on Rumble as soon as they start getting streaming. As it is, my content gets forwarded over there. There's a BitChute account that gets maintained. And the earlier discussion of I run my own private chat server also exists. You can find all of that over in the YouTube description. Try not to hand that one out eternally. Make the barrier to entry exist.
Yeah, no doubt. Keep that wall built. This has been awesome. Don the Pleb, thanks, man. Thanks for joining us on Counterflow.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the chat with Don the Pleb. I'm going to reach out and maybe get on his show as well. We talked about that a little bit after we finished recording. I think that would be good. He does live streams every Friday, and they're damn good. So on to the housekeeping for this show. May 15th, I will be speaking at the Oregon State Libertarian Party Convention. My friend Thaddeus Russell will be speaking as well, so that should be fun if you're up and around that area. Follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel, and check this out. I keep saying, yeah, the website's changed, but the address is still death2tyrantspodcast.com. No longer is it that. It is official, counterflowpodcast.com. Go check out the website. You can sign up to be a Patreon donor, all of that good stuff there. And what else do we got? The Telegram group. Get the Telegram app, search Counterflow with Buck Johnson, and join us in the room on Telegram. YouTube channel. We do all of these shows as videos as well, including this one. And if you want to see what a badass Don the Pleb is, go check out the YouTube channel, and you'll find it. He's smoking away as we discuss what we discussed today. And I think I even saw him with a beer at one point too. And go to iTunes, give us a rating and a review if you so choose. That would be very helpful. You guys have been so kind on there. A few funny negative ones, but the nice ones are truly kind. So I appreciate that. And until next week, you guys have a good one.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been the Counterflow Podcast, a part of the Renegade Media Network.